Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I'm going to tell you about a neighbor who tells me that I'm in an HOA now. I've always believed in being a good neighbor, friendly in the mornings, offering to collect mail when someone's away, quiet at night. Nothing complicated, just respect for my neighbors. I moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood years before anyone mentioned a homeowners association. Home was built before the new development down the street. It was a cozy, single-story home with a tidy backyard. And, most importantly for me, a mid-sized pool I've loved since I put my feet in it. The pool is my refuge. I jump in after a long day in summer. We grill, relax, and watch sunsets with friends. My sanctuary is one of the main reasons I bought the property. I didn't know the undeveloped lot down the street would become a dense row of modern uniform homes when I bought the house. The developer created a new HOA for these new homes, which many residents enthusiastically embraced. Over the years, HOAs have been criticized for having too many rules, but some are reasonable. The neighborhood expects you to mow your lawn, not throw wild parties until 4 a.m., and clean up after your dog. All well and good. However, I never imagined being forced to deal with a HOA I wasn't in. For the first few years after these modern houses appeared, everything was quiet. The new neighbors were mostly polite, and while some complained about the uniform fence's drab color, nothing major occurred. I'd see new residents walking their dogs, jogging at dawn, or holding neighborhood yard sales in the community park they built in the development. The old and new houses were separated by an invisible line. Our old ways, like not paying HOA dues or getting permission to plant a rose bush in front of our porch, were familiar. Parking restrictions, mailbox designs, and other rules were strictly followed by the newcomers. I still stopped to chat with a few. Manny and Tessa were always friendly, inviting me to one of their backyard barbecues in their newly landscaped backyard. Karen, a corner lot resident, was the odd, almost militant HOA enforcer I first heard about. People called her strict and sharp-eyed. Tessa told me Karen counted a neighbor's decorative lawn ornaments because she suspected the neighbor was in violation of a bylaw that prohibited more than 4. I remember thinking, thankfully that's not my issue. Karen would soon watch over the entire neighborhood, including old houses, while I was blissfully unaware. My first encounter with her was minor. I trimmed my hedges and left the clippings in a neat bundle by the curb for yard waste pickup the next morning. Karen strolled up my driveway, introduced herself, and asked about the HOA curb appeal rule. I politely explained my home was here before the new HOA, so I wasn't restricted. Her eyes flickered with a triumphant challenge, like she already saw me as a neighborhood rebel who would annoy her. She said, tapping the driveway. Consider investigating that. The new association boundaries may include your property. I told her I'd researched it when the development started, but she pursed her lips and nodded, pretending to pay attention. Graciously, I bid her good night. That seemed like the end at the time. Nothing could have been more wrong. Manny soon informed me that Karen was spreading yard rumors. The older part of the neighborhood was being brought up to standard, and I might have to join the HOA or face unspecified consequences. Manny apologized on her behalf. He said he didn't know what she was talking about, but Karen claimed to be in close contact with the developer and possibly the county's zoning office. I ignored it because I had no legal obligation to join a HOA created decades after my house was built. Her time was her own to waste with idle threats. My pool confrontation was unexpected. A hot Saturday afternoon made you want to cool off in water. Looking up at the sky from my pool, I felt the stress of a stressful work week melt away. I heard footsteps near my fence suddenly. Karen was leaning over the gate with an official clipboard when I stood up. Her oversized sunglasses and smug expression were on display. "You're not allowed to swim here," she said, as if she had set local water laws. "According to our records, you never registered your pool with the association." I thought I misheard. I dabbed at my face and said, "I've had this pool for years and I'm not in the association." "I never was," she snorted. "We think your house is in the new zone. Pool operators must register for safety and liability reasons. You must stop swimming until the HOA board approves." I was astonished by her. My heart raced with anger and confusion. It was absurd that someone could come onto my property. Okay, she was on the sidewalk, and forbid me from using my pool. I calmly told her my house predated the development. I added that I had never signed a contract putting me under HOA control. Karen raised her eyebrows pitifully. "If you want to avoid fines or even a lien, you should really take this seriously." She smiled coldly and added, "But hey, I might overlook it if you do me a little favor." My annoyance turned to shock. "What favor, standing in my pool's shallow end?" I asked. "It's a hot summer," she said. "If I can use your pool whenever I want, I may not report this violation immediately. I believe we can reach an informal neighbor-to-neighbor arrangement." This woman had unmatched nerve. She blackmailed me. "Are you really threatening me with fines for using my pool unless I let you swim here whenever you want?" I asked incredulously. She shrugged. "Call it what you want, but I think helping each other is beneficial." I might have laughed if not stunned. The idea that this was helping each other out was absurd. I clearly told her no, and that her request was inappropriate. She lifted her chin defiantly, saying she would send me official paperwork soon, then marched off, leaving me half shocked and half furious in the afternoon sun. Over the next week, I tried my usual routine. I cut my lawn, walked my dog, and waved to neighbors. But I felt uneasy, like Karen was waiting to pounce. I saw her car slow down in front of my house, as if she was taking pictures or gathering evidence that I was swimming illegally. I received a thick envelope with an official-looking seal in the mail. The letter contained references to pool safety bylaws, mandatory guidelines, and voluntary registration. Behind the letter were forms requiring the homeowner's signature, a registration fee, and a note reminding me of the HOA's fines. Despite its amateurish appearance, it had enough legitimacy to make me worry Karen had found some obscure legal angle. Still, I couldn't believe I had to register my pool when my property wasn't in the HOA. I took the envelope and called Manny, a more open-minded new HOA board member. "What was up?" I asked. Manny apologized for Karen's intrusion, unaware. He claimed the letter was not from the HOA board. He also said he'd asked the other members if Karen was overreaching. Manny said no one authorized her to send me anything. It appeared she was doing this alone. Her board compliance committee had oversight duties but no power to annex older homes into the association. This relieved and enraged me. Karen forged official letters or used HOA letterhead without permission. As I considered her plan, it seemed she was desperate for a way to access my pool. She may have wanted block queen status. I did some research and confirmed what I suspected. She couldn't force me to join the new HOA legally. My house was built 17 years before the association. That meant I never accepted the new development's covenant or bylaws. County records showed my parcel had no HOA. Furthermore, the developer's map showed that my property line was outside the newly constructed association zone. This was solid. With this information, I wrote my letter. I cited county records and property law in the simplest way. I told Karen and the HOA board that I was exempt from their rules. I kindly requested that they stop contacting me about such matters unless they needed to verify my legal status. Polite, but firm. I visited Manny before sending the letter. I wanted to make sure I wasn't nuking the HOA if Karen did it. Manny invited me into his home, apologized profusely, and promised board support. He promised to clarify it at the next HOA meeting to control Karen. I felt better, thinking this fiasco would soon be laughable. It wasn't easy. 2 weeks later, Karen was again on my driveway when I got home from work. Her companion this time was a short, bespectacled man in a polo shirt with a local real estate group's logo. They looked smug as I got out of my car. Karen said good evening with fake politeness. She introduced the man as a county code enforcer. That made me jump because involving the county could be trouble. A man nodded. "There was a complaint," he said, looking uneasy. "Something about an unregistered pool that might violate local codes." My heart sank. Could she have twisted county code to advance her agenda? I breathed and said, "I have the pool installation building permits. My house predates the development. I can show you the county permit if you like." Karen looked surprised and pursed her lips. "Just, yes, please," the code enforcement officer said. "If you get that, I'll confirm no violation. Continue from there." I searched my filing cabinet for the old permit inside. He received it from me. Karen glared at him as he read it. After a while, he smiled and thanked me. "Everything's in order here," he told her. "You cannot force him to join a group. The county recognizes his permit and installation as legal." Karen spewed bylaw references in protest, but the officer was already walking back to his car, politely reminding her that county codes don't enforce HOA rules. He also noted that HOA members' private covenants do not apply to non-members, especially older properties excluded from development. Karen's face showed anger and defeat. She told me, "This isn't over. We must protect this community." She stormed off, leaving me with the code enforcement officer who rolled his eyes and apologized for the inconvenience. I was done. I wouldn't give up swimming because of her made-up rules in my private pool. I expected she wouldn't let go easily. She might use a new strategy, so I prepared. She might throw something in my pool to sabotage it or call the police with noise complaints every time I had a backyard barbecue at night. I added some security cameras. I already had one on my front porch, but I added 2 more, one facing the backyard pool and one covering the side gate. Soon after, I found a strange piece of evidence that Karen may have trespassed on my property. I saw a footprint on my wet pool deck one morning. One small shoe-shaped footprint was near the ladder, fresh enough to indicate someone stepped there, but who? No one visited that night. I reviewed the footage because my cameras were new and untested. Karen, her face partially covered by a large floppy hat, carefully opened my side gate and walked right up to the pool at midnight. She dipped her hand, looked around, and left. The feeling was unsettling. I saved the footage and debated calling the police, but I also wanted to see if she dug her own grave deeper. It horrified Manny and Tessa when I told them about this. Tessa said Karen wanted to see if I was still using the pool illegally. Manny had no explanation for her bizarre intrusion. I kept the video as evidence in case I needed it. Meanwhile, another neighborhood drama was unfolding. Newcomer Leah painted her front door brightly. Although it was a beautiful turquoise, the HOA's palette only allowed earth tones. Karen immediately cited Leah for unauthorized exterior modification, threatening a fine if she didn't repaint. Leah countered by showing other houses in the development with colorful doors. Karen had singled her out because of their community garden dispute. Manny informed me that the HOA board was reviewing Karen's petty citations without their knowledge. Stress was rising. Karen bullied more than just me. Despite this, I used my pool. The summer was brutal, but I was more determined than ever to enjoy my property's fruits. I had a friend over and we laughed about being barred from my pool. I recounted Karen's harassment to my friend while sipping iced tea. As expected, that familiar shape passed the fence line. Karen took photos with her phone from across the street. Angered, I waved cheerfully at her, making her scowl and leave. My friend joked about inviting her over for a swim. I told her Karen tried blackmail. We laughed at the absurdity. Despite the humor, I was frustrated because this woman was trying to gradually take my property away. Karen called me enraged a few days later. She threatened to sue me on behalf of the HOA for ignoring multiple compliance notices. She also claimed that I defamed her by showing her late-night pool visit to neighbors. I calmly asked if she realized her trespass. She claimed she was investigating a community hazard. I warned her that if she returned to my property, we would have a problem. I told her I had video of her trespass. That ended the conversation quickly. Considering that might finally shut her down, I focused on other things. Busy work kept me at the office more. My schedule prevented me from using my pool during the week, but weekends were mine. On Saturday afternoon, a letter was taped to my front door. It said, "You have been reported to the Homeowners Association for repeated violations. The board's authority requires you to stop using your pool." There was no signature, but I recognized Karen's handwriting. The final straw. I consulted a lawyer friend to see if this harassment was excessive. My friend told me Karen couldn't enforce HOA rules on my property under local law. Any attempt could be harassment or misrepresentation. Also, forging official letters or threatening frivolous lawsuits could result in civil liability. My lawyer friend said I could file a cease and desist letter or charges if she kept trespassing. I inhaled. I wanted to avoid a full-scale legal battle. Going to court for something so trivial was a headache. But I wouldn't let her keep up these antics. My friend wrote me a formal letter. It clarified my legal position, cited property records, warned that her repeated harassment could lead to legal action, and politely requested that she never contact me again without an attorney. We added stills from my security footage of her trespassing as a subtle reminder that we had evidence. I personally delivered this letter to Manny, who could bring it to the next HOA board meeting. I sent a copy to the HOA mailing address. Manny promised to show the board that Karen was acting out. He wanted to maintain neighborhood peace, but Karen was clearly a loose cannon. Manny even offered to publicly clarify that my house was never HOA governed to show good faith. Putting it in the monthly newsletter would let new residents know not to bother me about anything association-related. Manny then told me the board had an emergency meeting. They concluded that Karen's actions were unwarranted and that the HOA was not against me. The board issued an internal warning. requiring her to resign from her compliance committee position or stop policing non-association properties. Manny claimed Karen was defiant after 2 board members argued with her. She maintained that she had every right to standardize all local homes. Her board colleagues disagreed, but she persisted. Karen tried a new tactic. She called my pool a mosquito breeding ground, claiming it was unsanitary and dangerous to public health. She sought local health department involvement. Thankfully, my pool is well kept. I chlorinate often and keep it clear. I welcomed the health inspector, who found no problems as expected. The inspector laughed at the complaint, saying, "We get nuisance calls like this sometimes. Sorry for bothering you." After defeating that attempt, Karen seemed to quiet down. A parallel drama involving that bright turquoise door was unfolding. Leah petitioned for more exterior color options. Manny also discovered that Karen had sent multiple unauthorized fines to residents for minor issues, like having a garden hose in sight, or decorative flags that didn't match the community color scheme. Neighborhood groups demanded Karen leave the board. Tessa told me a formal motion to remove her would be tried and she would lose her job. Manny then revealed that Karen may have forged the HOA president's signature on documents, including the letter she sent me. Manny and the president found no official mention of my address or pool directive in their internal records. Karen's actions were mostly secret. Karen also forged documents about other properties, like Leah's door color citation, the HOA board discovered. Given this information, the board would likely fire Karen. I mostly gave a statement confirming the suspicious letters I received. Manny received copies of everything, including the envelope with the suspicious letterhead. Manny said they had enough evidence to expel Karen as the board compiled it. They just needed to do it right to avoid her lawsuit. Ironically, the association seemed to fear legal trouble as much as I did. I heard little about Karen's possible ouster as weeks passed. I continued to swim in my beloved pool and host weekend get-togethers with close friends. However, neighborhood tension persisted. Nobody believed Karen would roll over without a fight, so people whispered her next move. One hot afternoon, everything boiled over. I chose a quiet day off. I planned to read by the pool in my backyard. Street yelling erupted. I went to my front yard and saw Karen arguing with a uniformed police officer and a few worried neighbors. Confused, I approached to see what was happening. Karen gesticulated wildly, pointing everywhere. "She's telling the officer that you're trespassing on her property," Manny whispered, startled. "Her stuff." "But I'm in my driveway," I said, confused. Karen claimed that an arcane local ordinance redrawn the boundary lines and gave her part of my driveway and yard. She demanded the officer remove me for refusing to vacate. It was absurd. The officer appeared exasperated. I informed him of my well-documented property line calmly. The officer requested official records, so I showed the county deed. Karen shouted that I was a liar, that the neighborhood was part of the community plan, and that the association had authorized her to defend it from squatters. She called them squatters. Manny told the officer that Karen had no authority and that the board had never recognized a boundary line that annexed my house. He called the HOA president on speakerphone there. "My property was completely outside the HOA's jurisdiction," the president confirmed. Karen raged, turning red. She shouted that the law was on her side and that she wouldn't let the Wild West rule her clean, family-friendly neighborhood. Angered, the officer asked Karen for legal proof of her claim. Her only possessions were the nonsense forms she printed. She was warned to stop lying by the officer. The watching neighbors shook their heads in disbelief. Karen glared at me and stomped off, muttering. HOA board business ended. Manny informed me the following week that they voted to remove Karen from her board position, removing her title. Word spread that she had been reported to the county for falsifying documents, forging signatures, and making nuisance calls to local authorities. Manny said the board was considering legal action if she kept harassing people. Karen didn't seem willing to retreat. She wrote a lot of letters accusing neighbors of witchcraft. Some residents of the new development saw her pacing in front of the clubhouse and arguing with board members several times. Tessa said Karen's last stand was about declaring the association corrupt. She threatened to sue, but was ignored. She packed up after her official removal. Her house had a "for sale" sign within a month. During this time, one last interesting subplot occurred. I found out from Manny and Tessa that the real estate company handling Karen's home listing was the same group that had once visited me with the code enforcement officer. That short, bespectacled man apparently worked for them part-time, and had only come along to my property because Karen told him there might be a serious code issue. He was never actually a county code enforcement officer. He was misusing a city volunteer badge in some bizarre arrangement with Karen. When the real estate company discovered that he had done this at Karen's request, they promptly fired him, and the county volunteer program was notified. It seemed like a messy situation, but it only underscored how manipulative Karen had been. As Karen's moving day approached, I braced myself for some final act of sabotage, but either she realized she was out of options, or she was too preoccupied with her next steps. On the day the moving truck arrived, she was gone by noon. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift from the neighborhood. After her departure, things settled back to normal quite quickly. The board, with Manny's guidance, began making some positive changes. They revised certain outdated guidelines, dropped many of the petty fines Karen had forced on people, and improved transparency by circulating monthly newsletters that actually told people what was going on. The turquoise door, by the way, stayed up. Leah was beaming about it. My backyard remains my favorite place in the world. Nothing beats the satisfaction of floating in my pool on a hot day, knowing that nobody can bar me from enjoying something that's rightfully mine. Sometimes I still get a chuckle thinking about how Karen tried to forbid me from swimming in my own property, just because it wasn't registered in her mysterious database. In the end, her scheme backfired spectacularly. She lost her HOA position, had to sell her house, and moved away under a cloud of scandal. Meanwhile, I continued to do exactly what I'd done for years. Live my life peacefully, respecting my neighbors, minding my own business, and exercising my right to enjoy my own pool. In the aftermath of Karen's move, a few interesting tidbits about her background emerged. Some neighbors claimed she had a history of overstepping boundaries in her previous community, too. Supposedly, she moved here hoping to gain some kind of leadership role in a brand new HOA, expecting she'd have full control. When that power never fully materialized, she resorted to forging documents and strong-arm tactics to bully neighbors into compliance. But once enough people stood up to her, she had no choice but to leave. There was also a brief period when I worried that her potential lawsuit threats might still hang over my head. My lawyer friend reassured me it was highly unlikely she'd actually pursue anything, given how thoroughly she'd been discredited. The video evidence of her trespassing, the official statements from the board, and her blatant misuse of volunteer code enforcement only strengthened my position if she ever tried. To this day, I've never heard a peep from any attorney claiming to represent Karen. Though this ordeal was stressful, I learned a valuable lesson. You don't let bullies push you around on your own property, no matter how official they make themselves out to be. If you stand firm, gather the facts, and consult the right people, it's very possible to turn the tables on those who thrive on intimidation. Karen thought she could manipulate everyone with a combination of fake authority and fear, but once the real facts came to light, she had nowhere left to hide. Still, it surprises me how far some folks will go to feel powerful. To imagine she would go so far as forging letters, stepping onto my property under cover of night, or lying to the police about property lines, it's incredible. Part of me hopes she finds a better way to live her life, wherever she ended up. But the bigger part of me is just relieved she's no longer my neighbor. Interestingly, some new families moved into that corner lot soon after Karen sold the house. They turned out to be extremely friendly, a complete contrast to the atmosphere Karen brought. They even introduced themselves with homemade cookies on the first day they arrived, explaining that they wanted to make a positive first impression. We had a great laugh about how they shouldn't worry, because after what the neighborhood went through with the previous owner, we were just happy to see a smile and genuine warmth. When the conversation shifted to the HOA, they mentioned they were aware of some controversies from the old guard, but they didn't plan to get entangled in them. They just wanted to live in peace. That was music to my ears. Sometimes Manny still jokes that I should open my pool to a weekly community swim, if only to celebrate the downfall of Karen's imaginary restrictions. But I'm not quite ready to turn my private haven into a public venue. My pool is my space. No registration forms, no nonsense, no blackmail. I did, however, invite Manny, Tessa, Leah, and a few other folks over for a nice poolside cookout to celebrate Karen's departure. We grilled burgers, toasted with lemonade, and marveled at how surreal the last few months had been. Everybody breathed easier knowing the neighborhood was free of her tyranny. As for the official punishment Karen faced, the biggest one seems to be losing her credibility, her board position, and ultimately, her home in our community. She also faced the humiliation of having the HOA collectively denounce her actions. Even if there was no jail time or large-scale legal consequence, that social and financial blow is a form of retribution in its own right. I still have my quiet, comfortable house, my sparkling pool, and a circle of neighbors who now look out for each other rather than wage war. In a way, Karen's overreach actually united a bunch of us. We learned we had more in common than we thought, and we stood up for our rights together. One last amusing detail. The day Karen's moving truck finally pulled away, I remember hearing the faint sound of tires screeching in frustration as she turned the corner. Manny stood next to me, watching her taillights disappear. He let out a huge sigh of relief, turned to me and said, "Free at last." We both burst into laughter. Then I invited him over for an impromptu pool dip to commemorate the end of the saga. He happily accepted. The water never felt more refreshing. I know some folks might say I was lucky that she didn't actually drag me into a messy legal battle, but I think luck is only part of it. Knowing your rights, documenting everything, and taking a stand go a long way when dealing with someone who believes they can steamroll everyone else. If there's anything I hope others take from this story, it's that knowledge is power. Don't be afraid to push back when you know you're in the right. That's exactly what I did, and I ended up with a peaceful home and a brand new group of neighborhood friends. I'm grateful that my house, built so many years before that HOA was formed, remains exactly what it was always meant to be, my personal, private retreat. My pool is still the highlight. Even as I sit here typing this, I can look outside to my backyard oasis and feel a wave of gratitude that nobody can ever barge in to claim it for themselves again. And if anyone ever does try something that bold, I now have the experience and plenty of documentation to handle it. But I seriously doubt that's going to happen. After all, the biggest busybody in town is long gone, and the rest of us are much the wiser. Friends, thank you. See you soon.